A deep web experience from the other side, NSFW. My name is, redacted. I'm 26 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'6", so pretty typical really. This seems really pointless now, but I promise it is important information though. It will mean a lot later in this message. It's hard to decide where to start, so I will just run you through from the beginning. I suppose, 2 weeks ago I was out for a run before work, and before the road got hectic with the heavy morning work traffic. There is a fog. I remember this distinctly because it was so thick that it actually made it hard to see about 10 feet in front of me. Before I knew it, a dark red SUV started to become visible through the heavy clouds. I don't know what happened here really, as it was all so fast. 1 minute I was running my normal route, the next I was grabbed and thrown into the SUV. I guess they used chloroform or something like it to knock me out. Because when I came to I was in a solid white room with absolutely nothing in it but me. I don't know what was worse, realizing that I had been kidnapped, or the maddening essence of the dead and empty room I was being kept in. For 2 days I saw and heard no one, minus the terrified screams, pleas and downright pitiful begging that escaped my mouth. Finally they came, but it was no blessing. I was taken to another white room, with actual stuff in it, stripped down to nothing and washed like a dog, cold water and all. There were 3 men and 1 woman in the room. The woman just sat back and observed, every now and again writing something down. The men heckled me, tossed me around between them, they touched me, but blessedly the woman spoke up before it went any further. She had a very thick German accent. I remember she said for them to wait until it was my turn, that they didn't want to spoil anything. I was taken to yet another solid white room, but this one wasn't empty. There was a chair in the center, screwed into the floor, an empty box, about the size of a coffee pot box, and a metal swivel table covered with a white cloth. Here I was plopped into the chair, my ankles and wrists tightly bound with heavy metal latches. I was terrified. I asked them what they were going to do with me, but no one spoke a word as they went about their tasks. I felt like an object to them, not a human just like them. Everyone left and, once again, I was alone. A whirring noise brought me out of the panic attack I was beginning to go into. I watched in horror as an extra-large television descended from above me and settled in against the wall directly in front of me. A man dressed like an old butcher from the 50s and a woman dressed like an old-fashioned nurse came in and uncovered the metal table, revealing a plethora of small tools, a scalpel, several other types of med-surg equipment, dental tools and other things I didn't really recognize. I have never been so terrified in my entire life. My hell truly began when the screen lit up and a small group of people came up in their own chat bubbles. The butcher asked the nurse if everything was in order. She nodded and said in a German accent, "Yes, doctor, everyone has paid." He smiled and thanked the group of 6 on the screen. My body trembled beyond my control. "Very well then, let's begin," the butcher doctor commented. The nurse walked over to the screen and turned up the volume. "What is your first request?" she asked the panel. The first person in line on screen said, "Bite her nipple, hard, then peel it off nice and slow." This is where I began screaming. They began attempting to put a ball gag in my mouth, but the man on the screen stated, "Let her scream." The nurse walked behind me, grabbing my breasts hard and sticking them out as far as she could. The butcher then leaned down and bit the right one. White hot pain seared through my body. Just as the man wanted, I screamed. The nurse, which I heard the butcher call Olga, brought a long thin pair of strangely shaped tongs and a scalpel. The butcher took the scalpel, leaving the nurse with the tongs. She grabbed my nipple and pulled it out as far as she could, so far I thought she might rip it off. Then the butcher stepped forward and began to slice through the tender skin of my breast. I screamed and screamed, but my captors didn't even react. I tried struggling, but it only made things worse. In a matter of just a few minutes, as the butcher took his sweet time, I was left with no nipple on my right breast. I could feel warm blood leaking down my stomach and pooling underneath me. The nurse and butcher looked expectantly at the screen, awaiting their next order. I stole a glance at the man currently commanding my torture. He was just a normal guy. They all were. Out of the 6 men, only 1 looked slightly uncomfortable. They wore suits and ties and looked like professionals, each appearing to have just stepped out of the office. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'm not sure what I expected, but it wasn't suit and tie wearing office bros. My heart sank. If these guys were capable of this, then anybody was. Struggling against my restraints, determined not to suffer any longer, I cried out and cursed the men behind that damn television screen. I cursed the butcher and the nurse. I continued my tirade until I heard one of the men say, "Undo her and beat her against the walls." I looked back up in shock. Was there no end to their cruelty? Quickly, the nurse moved the cart of horror toys out of the room and returned to my side. Together, they removed my shackles and I was free. I bolted for the door, but was yanked backward by my hair. Again I screamed in pain, which seemed to please everyone but myself. Before I could even fall, the butcher swung me around, still holding by my hair, and slammed me into the wall opposite the door. I hit it hard enough to knock the wind out of my lungs. Again, before I was able to even think of what to do, I was slammed into another wall, then another, and another until the man with the request said it was enough for him. The butcher grabbed me by my upper arm and forced me in front of the screen. I have never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, so small in all my life. I prayed that they were done. The nurse stepped forward then and said, "You have 7 more minutes of paid time. What is your final wish for our little beauty here?" She gestured at me. There was silence for a moment as the men seemed to be deciding on what they wanted for the finale, but the request was nothing I had braced for: rape her. I was floored. I begged and pleaded that they change their minds. To the butcher to please not. To the nurse, as a woman, to please stop this. But my words fell on deaf ears, and the butcher seemed determined to oblige, as I heard the sound of his leather apron hit the floor and the belt come undone. He still held me by my arm. I struggled with all my might to get away, but I was jarred when the hulk of a man turned and backhanded me right across my face. I nearly fell, and he used this to his advantage, throwing me the rest of the way to the ground, positioning me so that the men could see everything from a sideways view. "Make it rough," one of the men called. The butcher crawled over top of me and smiled. With pleasure, he stated, wrapping one large, beefy hand around my throat and pushing down. By the time he was finished with me, my screams had diminished to pathetic-sounding sniffles and begging. I just wanted this torture over with. I wanted them to kill me, and this was the moment that he would, sure, that would be the men's last request. I was shocked to hear them say to keep me alive for another time, and that they would likely be back. The man lifted me off the ground, licked my ear and whispered, "Looks like it's your lucky night, sweetheart." I was far too exhausted from the pain and shame to fight back. I just let them take me, praying that they would end the torture. Unfortunately, I was immediately shoved back into my little white room and left there until they decided that if I put this information on the normal internet, it would bring in more customers. Please stop watching these videos. Please stop visiting the deep web. This isn't a joke. It's people's lives and they shouldn't be destroyed, tortured or killed for the amusement of others. I already know that I won't leave this place alive, or intact, or that matter, but maybe I can save someone else from this fate, maybe you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button to support my work. And as always, enjoy the fear, my dear.